All right, well, now we're going to go into our live question and answer panel discussion for our folks. Unfortunately, I think we may have lost Mary Fetter. Mary, are you still on the line? I think we're having some technical difficulties. We'll hope she gets back. So I'll save any questions we had for her, and if we don't get her back, we'll make sure the folks who asked those questions will get those addressed and get that information back to you. But I do want to welcome Dr. Mehta and Dr. Kolarcik, who are on the line with us. Are you both there?
Yes.
Yes, we're here.
Excellent. Thank you both. We really appreciate you being here. All right, well, I'm going to jump in. I've got a couple of questions that came through while your presentations were going on, and I want to go ahead and give you the opportunity to answer those. So the first one is for you, Christi. Have you considered using gold fibers for brain implants? Gold's highly conductive and resistant to corrosion.
So in terms of the design of some of those, I have not been, we have not thought about gold, but, and I'm trying to think of reasons that we may not have at this point besides the overall, the design, and I can't think of any. So that's a really great suggestion, and I'll make sure I take it back to our team, and we'll see if typically the materials that are used, gold is one of them, but we have mostly used platinum and platinum iridium combinations because those have seemed to be the best overall for our purposes, but we can always revisit those things. So thanks for that question.
Great. Thank you, Christi. Dr. Mehta, a question for you. You mentioned mercury. Are there any other environmental factors that are of interest to researchers right now?
Sure, there's a host of factors out there. Mercury is certainly one of them. Lead is another one as well. Something called cyanobacteria, which are found in bodies of water, fresh water. So there's certainly a host of environmental contaminants out there that we're looking at and we're funding research for.
Great, and a follow-up question to that, have you found pockets where there have been an unusual number of ALS cases that you think are related to environmental factors?
So we, on occasion, do get requests for, areas where there are a higher number of ALS cases than there should be. But one of the issues that we kind of encounter is because we're still trying to figure out the etiology of ALS, that is, what causes ALS. And because of that, that becomes kind of more of a challenge there. But whenever we get requests from states simply saying, hey, or saying we have, potentially a higher cases going on, what we do is we offer our support, such as providing more information about the National ALS Registry and how patients can enroll, as well as working with, let's say, for example, the local health department, or as well as the local EPA office, if we have to go ahead and potentially do some sort of sampling and so forth. But I mean, there are areas of the country which appear to have potentially higher, I would say, pockets of ALS than other areas, and a lot of it could be associated with environmental contaminants.
Great, thank you. Dr. Kolarcik, we had somebody mention that they are, let me get my question back up here. Sorry, I just lost it, of course, as I'm getting ready to tell you. It's not so much a question, but Chip wanted you to know that he is in week 4 of 8 of getting electrical stimulation on his upper legs in an attempt to make his muscles stronger. And he'll do another 8 weeks in November or December. It seems to be slowing down muscle loss. Is there anything you wanted to add to that or expand upon how that would work?
So I think that has shown some, that has been helpful, that in other types of physical therapy has been helpful for some people with ALS. So, I mean, from my presentation, it's that motor neuron and its connection and talking with the muscle that keeps that communication is really what keeps the muscle going. But the ultimate problem with ALS is that the motor neuron itself is the thing that's dying. And so even if we can keep the muscle healthy, if we can't do something to preserve the health of the motor neuron, then we get to the same endpoint, unfortunately. So the one good thing about that is if we have some type of therapies that can be that can restore or maintain that neuronal health, it could be used in combination with some physical therapy that also maintains the muscle at the same time. So if we're able to, it's really important to do both of those things. I'm glad that it seems to be slowing CHIP's progression, and I'm glad that that seems to be working. But we do still have to work on making sure that the motor neurons stay healthy.
Great, thank you. Dr. Mehta, this one just came in from Mike Fleming, who's on the call. Would there be any value to the National Registry of knowing that deceased ALS patients had given DNA samples to a website like Ancestry.com?
That's a really good question. So obviously there's quite a few groups out there, Ancestry.com, 23andMe, where the public can give their samples to for like, you know, ancestral testing and so forth. A lot of these particular groups right here, I don't believe they're going to be doing specific ALS testing for these genes, only because there are certain neurochips that are used to go identify these genes, and then there's also a confirmation test that's used for certain other genes to go ahead and look for genes such as C9orf72. So it's certainly an intriguing question, but like I said, I think a lot of these groups are not really looking at specific ALS genes. And Christi, what do you think? I mean, I don't believe, in my experience, that these groups are looking for these genes only because they're very specific genes, and the type of platforms that would need to go ahead and look for them. I don't believe that that these groups most likely would do that.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree, Paul. That's my take. I think what places like Ancestry do are just very, very generic. And so, yeah, you would need more specialized looks at the specific genes that we know about for ALS. And certainly, being involved in some of the larger consortia that are looking for not just the genes we know about, but additional correlates to ALS. I don't know that Ancestry would be very helpful for that.
Thank you for that. Actually, we have a question that's going to be live. Vicky Cohill would like to come on and ask her question in person. So Vicky, if you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question, go for
it. This is Vicky's sister, actually. I'm Vicky's cows. And there's Vicky. She's been very good at paying attention for all these hours. She's in year 4 of her ALS diagnosis. And one of the things we've been watching very carefully is the neuron studies. And I'm just curious if you think that will be coming to FDA approval, and if so, will there be qualifications for that to receive that treatment?
So I can take a stab at what I know about the Brainstorm's Neurone trial. So I know that so it's currently in phase 3 trials. I will also add that the ALS Association did partner with I Am ALS, so that they can to fund a biomarker measurement in people that are taking part in this trial. And so from my talk, the biomarkers are just things that will allow us to have some sense of whether the therapy is working. As in terms of the approval, Paul, you can maybe comment on that a little bit more, but I will say that the association and all of those groups that we partner with, and even others, work very hard to get the FDA's partnership and guidance throughout the process. So I would be encouraged, just because of those relationships, that should there be the significant results that we are all hoping for, that it would be moving to a larger population relatively quickly.
So
yeah, just to quickly add to what Christi was saying, so we actually have to recruit for that study at the National ALS Registry, so patients would get information about the study and to go ahead and contact Brainstorm, which is the company which is running the neurone treatment. So I believe at the end of this year we'll have more information on the phase 3 trial and how that's coming along, certainly for efficacy. I think it's a really important trial. Stem cells certainly could be a a potential therapeutic regimen that could help certain ALS patients. So I think it is very exciting. Stem cell therapy has been used in other diseases as well. And so I think this is a really important trial out there, and the results certainly, will be very, very interesting when they come out. And hopefully the FDA, if it's promising, could certainly grant, approval much faster for use of this particular drug.
So can I follow up with that? That, we're trying to find something for, to help this, obviously, the progression to slow. Vicki was on the Radicava for almost 3 years, and she just recently stopped, and she's still doing well. She's not really progressing in the negative way that you might imagine, but we are just curious, does UPMC team with AGH on some of this, or is it separate? So some of the research, is it teamed?
So generally, the research is teamed. So, there are different people that are focusing on different things. What we've tried to do is certainly to expand that outside of, I will say, PIT/UPMC, to include other partners in the city, and even beyond that. And so some of those things, though, in the clinical setting, I would say, so when you go to the AGH clinic or the UPMC clinic, while there's not overlap between the physicians, I think the ALS Association helps provide a conduit between the two. And certainly as researchers, we are always open to partnerships and collaborations and things like that. So that is something that I think the field is generally very good at, is working together.
Yeah, hi, this is Mary. I am on the phone. I was muted. Sorry, can you hear me?
You can. Thank you for joining back.
Yeah, thanks. We have not partnered yet with UPMC on any of our studies, but I don't see why we can in the future. But right now, currently, we're just our own clinic site. So if anybody has any questions, they're more than welcome to get in contact with me.
Okay. And my last question is, so I guess it's to the National Registry. If I don't believe we're registered, and if we did register and say that we would like to have samples collected, would we have more information offered to us by joining up with that registry?
Yes, absolutely. So to join the National ALS Biorepository, you must first be in the registry. So you can go to our website, cdc.gov/ALS, and from there you can go ahead and register, and then you enter your information in, and someone will contact you regarding the biorepository. Currently, due to COVID-19, we've actually suspended in-home collections of blood, only because obviously there's a risk and so forth, and we want to make sure there are no sort of potentially patients getting exposed by the phlebotomists who come to the patients' homes to collect blood. However, we can send you a saliva kit, which can be used for DNA analysis and so forth. And then we're also looking to get approval when COVID-19 subsides to go ahead and go to the homes of the patients who opted in to do saliva, and to go back and do blood collections at a later date. But yes, absolutely, you can go ahead and register, and we can send you information on the biorepository as well as information about clinical trials and so forth.
Thank you for putting up with us.
Great questions. And just so you know, if anyone who's on here, if you have not registered and need help or some guidance, our care services staff, Reflino in particular, can help guide you through that process over the phone. So feel free to give us a ring if you need help going through the registration process. Well, Mary, since I've got you here real quick, let's go back. I've got a question for you. You'd mentioned the website at the end of your presentation, but can you tell us again about how people can get more information about the trials that you all are engaged in right now?
The one for AHN?
Yes, please.
Yeah, if you go on to clinicaltrials.gov and under that website put in the Pittsburgh area, it will tell you every trial that we have done, and it will say close to enrollment, and then it will say the ones that we are currently enrolling in. So we have one right now that we are enrolling, and then probably in 2 months we're going to have 2 more available.
Excellent, thank you. We had a couple questions that came in online. This is really, I think, for the whole group here. Are there any nutritional factors that seem to be associated with slowed progression? Are you aware of any research that's happening in that area?
So what we have seen in the research as well as the publications is that patients who have a higher BMI upon diagnosis seem to do a lot better. And so, the higher the BMI certainly is important. But patients with a lower BMI, because with ALS, obviously the nutrition is very important to make sure you are getting the amount of nutrition that you need. And so the folks with a higher BMI or who are on the heavier side, let's just say, when they're diagnosed, you have to go, do a little bit better with the disease course itself. Christi, you want to add to that?
I would just say there have been I would say more anecdotal. I don't think there were consensus factors. So Paul mentioned that yes, nutrition is a very important factor in making sure a person is getting enough calories and things like that every day. But I don't know that there is anything besides anecdotal evidence of some certain types of diets being beneficial for some patients over others. One thing if you guys don't do this already, there's a clinician, he's a neurologist at Duke, Rick Badalak, and he keeps a website. It's called ALS Untangled, and I'll put it in the chat for you guys if you are interested. But he keeps track of some of those anecdotal things. And so if someone says, I've been hearing that this specific dietary supplement has proven effective for some people with ALS, him and his team, they go to the literature and then they look at all the papers that are published, kind of come up with a consensus, and then if they need to, they kind of design a small study to try to answer the question, and then they keep that all online. So he does a really nice job of that, and it's a nice thing to keep up with. And again, I'll post it in the chat for those of you that are interested. But I don't think that there is anything that I could say at this point that would be a benefit for everybody besides just the general nutrition that Paul mentioned already.
Yeah, Rick's a great resource. He's, like Christi mentioned, a neurologist out of Duke Medical Center, and his website's really informative and lets patients know about different sorts of, stuff they're looking at and so forth. It's also really important to kind of debunk some of the things out there where, some patients, when they're newly diagnosed, they may try to get like stem cells like from different countries overseas, and how that potentially could be very, very dangerous. So, so what they do is, they really are a good website to kind of, go to kind of figure out, as in terms of what they're looking at. I know they're doing a clinical trial virtually, and I believe they're looking at curcumin turmeric to see if that potentially could slow down disease progression as well. But Rick's a great resource.
He's also a very snazzy dresser. You should look him up.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is.
Related to that real quick, I just want to mention, for those of you who do have ALS, if you are having trouble with keeping weight on or need nutritional supplements, that's something the chapter does offer free of charge. So just reach out to us if you do need that additional support. All right, next question. This is a good one. Is there a higher risk of people that are Pacific Islander getting ALS? And let me just expand that out and say, are there specific groups that are at a higher risk that you're aware of?
So from the studies I've seen, there are certain populations. In general, Pacific Islanders, Asians get ALS at a lower rate than Caucasians, and we're not sure why. If it's in the diet or if it's environmentally linked, it's certainly hard to say at this point what exactly are the factors. So originally, Guam was the initial cluster that occurred many, many years ago for ALS, I think in the 40s and 50s. But regarding Pacific Islanders, I believe from what I've heard, certainly, like I said, I mean, this group tends to get ALS at a much lower rate than other groups out there. So I'm not sure if I can really answer that question without getting more information about, regarding the Pacific Islanders in terms of, which island, they were from and so forth. Was there a family history, these diseases and so forth? So it's really hard to kind of, say yes or no. But like I said, from the evidence out there and the publications out there, Asians tend to get ALS at a much lower rate.
Great, thank you. Dr. Kolarcik, this next one's for you. You mentioned the Alexion clinical trial. I think a monoclonal antibody that interferes with immune-induced neurodegeneration. Is that trial recruiting in Pittsburgh?
So I was actually just, I was looking that up to see. I don't believe at UPMC is a site. Mary can comment on AGH. But that trial is, it is sort of an inhibitor of one component of the immune system. So that is a correct assessment of what that trial is. But I don't believe that it is at UPMC. Mary, I don't know if you want to, if you know of that.
Well, we are doing the Alexion trial. That's the one that it was presented. But that it's not up and running yet.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. Mehta.
If I could just quickly answer the question previously, there's more information provided by Felicia regarding husband being from Guam. Like I mentioned earlier, the Guamanian cluster I just referred to happened many, many decades ago, and it was that particular cohort was, I believe, there was a flying squirrel or something like that that was eaten, and that squirrel was eating cycad seeds, which were high in something called BMAA, and that which translated into getting ALS and so forth. But that really is not happening currently at all in Guam. I don't believe there's any sort of links between ALS and that particular cluster. Like I said, it was a exposure to the actual a type of animal that was being consumed and what the animal was eating itself, those particular seeds. So, but yeah, like I said, I mean, there currently are no studies or any sorts of information going on regarding any exposures happening in Guam at this time that I'm aware of.
Thank you for that follow-up. Next question, this is for all three of you, and whoever wants to jump in. How has COVID pandemic impacted research work currently?
So I would say I'm happy to start. So from a personal perspective, it has there has been a large limitation on the amount of people that can be in our laboratories at one time. So for example, the team that I showed you, so my students who are also students at the University of Pittsburgh didn't come back after spring break. And so they were working in the lab. There were 5 of them working in the lab for about 10 to 15 hours every week. And so since March, they have not been in to the lab. Hopefully some of them may be able to come back in the next month or so and get back in there at some level. So that's obviously less, less people and less time that we're able to work in the lab. I wasn't able to go, even myself, for a couple of months. We all had to just do anything that was absolutely necessary. We couldn't start any new experiments. So anything that was going on that we needed to finish up, we could do, but we couldn't start anything else. So that was a little bit of a damper to some of our progress. But the good news is that at the national level, there has been definitely work at that level to continue to identify projects and collaborations and opportunities to continue to advance the field. And so I know since the beginning of this year, the association has already committed over $13 million to 44 projects across the globe. And then some of those things that we've talked about are examples of additional commitments, like the Healy clinical trial platform, some new drug development efforts, some clinical trial infrastructure type grants, so that we can make those effective and make sure that we're keeping that pipeline going. So as much as possible, we're trying to, you know, keep everything going. But there definitely have been, in terms of being in labs and doing experiments, some setbacks and time that we're not able to put in the laboratory because of some of the restrictions.
Just very quickly, just to add what Christi was saying. Yeah, there's been an impact, I think, nationally when COVID-19 was first, spreading around the globe. Research was halted, but what we have seen is slowly researchers are very, very, resourceful and so forth, and so research is certainly being, picked up again. Healy platform trial is certainly a great example. Our biorepository was impacted only because, we do have a public face where phlebotomists are going out to collect blood, and so we wanted to make sure there's no potential exposure to patients. So that was certainly impacted, and it continues to be impacted. And also, I believe the activities regarding, letting people know about the National ALS Registry and what we do has also been impacted too, because we're not going to any sorts of patient symposiums or walks and so forth, and those are also been certainly impacted. But we will get by, and this will be behind us, and research will certainly pick up again, and that's certainly very important.
Yeah, and at Allegheny General, at the beginning, we were slowing it down, and it was all telemedicine. So the research is changing where they're adapting to let the visits to be telemedicine or telephone calls. Currently, we are continuing with starting up research. We just slowed it down since June. It's starting to pick up again. The clinic is fine for people to come in, and you can have somebody come in with you. I think they ask you 3 questions when you come in. If you have a fever, if you know somebody who has COVID, if you're being tested for COVID. But we are not impacted where we're not permitting people come in, which is nice. And I've been working since March. I've been going into the office, so I really haven't been impacted by COVID. So
that's great to hear. Excellent. We've got another question from one of our own staff members. Is there any current data regarding ALS with the African American community and other people of color?
So this is Paul. So data from the National ALS Registry shows that African Americans as well as Hispanics get ALS at a much lower rate than whites. We're not sure why. But there's also an area regarding access to care and potentially getting underdiagnosed as well. We know we're missing cases coming from the private pay sector, patients who get their care outside Medicare or outside the VA system and so forth. And we know there are, probably more cases, for example, let's say in California, Texas, and Florida, as well as New York, where we're actually doing outreach activities to go ahead and find those patients and have them enroll in the National ALS Registry with partnering with the ALS Association and other groups. But currently, the data that we have in-house shows that African Americans and other people of color get ALS at a much lower rate, and we're not sure why.
Yeah, so I would just agree with what Paul said, but I think that in the healthcare system, there definitely is a disparity within that system in dealing with people of color. So, it's possible that once there's more equity with respect to that, we won't see that. There was another interesting study, though, I think it was published about a year ago, and it did indicate that African Americans with ALS tended to get tracheostomies sooner and more frequently than their Caucasian counterparts. So this led to them actually living longer. I'm not sure if there have been any follow-up studies, but I think this was out of Wake Forest, a group there. But so there are some interesting potentially cultural differences between racial groups.
Excellent, thank you. Next question, we heard a lot about the Healy platform trial today. Are platform trials the future of ALS clinical trials?
I think platform trials are certainly one tool that can be used to go ahead and look for therapeutics for ALS. Platform trials have been used for many years in cancer, and they've proven to be fruitful. So certainly, I think it's very exciting to see platform trials in ALS. But certainly, it's another tool in the toolkit for ALS. Certainly.
I agree with that, and I certainly hope that that is I mean, there are just so many benefits to it, and especially with the situation with the placebo versus controls, and the number of people that you have to recruit for each. I think there's so many benefits to it. So I would imagine that it would continue to be used when possible in ALS trials.
That's great. That's exciting. I have one more question here, but before I get to it, I want to open up the opportunity. Is there anyone on the phone or online who wants to unmute and ask a question of any of our three panelists? All right. Well, let's go ahead and go to our last question, and that is, for each of the three of you, what excites you most about current research that's happening?
So I think right now, I mean, there has been a lot of research which has been done in clinical trials which are currently online or coming online for ALS, and that's very exciting. I think there's been more attention for ALS, and personally, I think more attention is needed for ALS across the board when it comes to research funding, awareness, access to care, and so forth. Sometimes ALS doesn't get the attention which it deservedly needs. Whether it's from research dollars or whether it's from other areas as well. But I think it's really a good time to look to see what's out there, and there are a lot of passionate, committed researchers out there like Christi, who are working to look at ALS at the cellular level as well, looking at the genetics and so forth. And this is certainly an exciting time, as we have more resources coming online, additional funding and so forth, more clinical trials. I think breakthrough, whether it's let's say with us upcoming stem cell therapy or a different therapy. I think certainly it's a very exciting time, to hopefully find out what causes ALS and have more treatments for ALS.
Christi,
Hello.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay. The trend, it seems to be at Allegheny, is that there's more treatment. The ones in the past have been just trying to see about the spirometry, but now it's more of what treatment can help prolong the progression of it, and I'm very excited about that area. And we're always looking for new trials, and I know Dr. Rana is very eager to continue participating in as many trials that we can. So the future looks good. We're going to have 3 strong trials coming up, so that'll be good. Thank you.
So I would probably, I'd probably say the thing I think that's most exciting, it starts with the ability to identify additional genetic causes and types of ALS. So it may be that there's this continuum of ALS, and if I know many of you have heard me talk before, and so I'm going to say something that you've probably heard me say before, but Paul brought up the parallel with cancer, and I think that we are more and more looking at ALS as if it was cancer. So when you say cancer, that includes so many different types of cancer, and we don't treat each of those types the same way. And so with ALS and things like the antisense therapies, for example, we know that those will work for certain genetic causes of ALS. And as we can start doing better with those genetic types of ALS, those people will live longer and do better, and hopefully we can turn it more into something that is chronic, and we can also figure out additional therapies that can complement that to not only just keep the disease from progressing, but understand it at a better level that we can improve function over time and possibly restore some level of function. So I think that's probably for me is one of the most encouraging things. I do think that there's still attention and just in general for the research community. It is not easy to make it, so to speak, in the research realm. So whenever you guys have the chance to, support research efforts or promote additional funding for up and coming researchers, for example, at the level of the NIH, I think it's really important because those will be the people that that will continue to see this through. But there is a lot to be excited about, a lot of collaboration, a lot of great people working in this field. And so I think using that collaborative energy, it will lead us to some positives, hopefully in the very near future.
Great, thank you so much. I'm sorry, we did have one more question that came in, so I'm going to ask it real quick. One of the folks attending today has recently gotten a feeding tube and has trouble doing studies. Are any of you aware of any studies that are allowing participants to use crushed pills?
I don't know of any.
Yeah, a lot of the eligibility sits with the drug companies themselves, and they can kind of figure out, or they can kind of let patients know exactly what sort of limitations they have regarding enrollment in a clinical trial. But I don't know of any sort of restrictions with crushed pills.
Yeah, that's something I'm not too sure about either. But there are some things that might be more of they wouldn't necessarily be trials where you might be receiving a drug, but they might be something like Chip mentioned earlier. So I know this is something that our lab is looking to start in the next 6 months or so. But we want to look at recordings of muscles in people with ALS over time, and there's not really any restriction in terms of what you can or can't be taking. But those aren't necessarily interventional. They're more investigating some of the mechanisms underlying ALS. So it wouldn't necessarily be like receiving a treatment or another drug. So I don't know if that really helps or speaks to the question that you're most interested in.
Thank you. And one more question came through. This is for Dr. Mehta. Would there be any value to the National Registry of knowing that deceased ALS patients had given DNA samples to websites? Oh, sorry, we already answered that question. Sorry, that looked like it came up again. I apologize. All right, well, with that, I think we've answered all of our questions. Thank you so much to Mary, Christi, and Paul for sharing your knowledge with us today. So much good information was shared out, and I hope that everyone found it valuable. So we're giving you a virtual round of applause from out in all of our different homes across Western Pennsylvania. Before we finish up, I just want to, again, say thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today, and to remind you to save the date for our next symposium, which is our Mobility and Equipment Symposium, which will be coming up on Saturday, September 5th. You can contact Sandra Thompson on our team at sandra@CURE4ALS.org for more information, or to RSVP. We'll also be sending out a post-symposium email with a survey. We would appreciate your feedback and hope that you all will be able to help us to continue improving on our annual research symposium. Again, thank you to Mary, Christi, and Paul for your time, and everyone have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.